But a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is really like what it was like on the ground in India. One thing I realized when I was making this presentation is like every single photograph, like all the data, like everything I'm about to tell you is like I took those photographs. Like these are like my people. Like that's the window. I took it from the window of my room. So I just want you to know that this is really like I'm not speaking for all of India. I'm not going to cover everything. I'm really just going to tell you about the people that I work with. Okay? All right. If you have any questions or anything, you should just interrupt me. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem, although you should be really familiar with the problem after what Ram and Toby said. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the solution. The WADI is the farming system I'm going to talk to you about, and then I'll put in my 2 cents about development today, and then we can do some questions and answers. Okay, so I worked with an NGO called BIFE. It's been around for 40 years. They work in 40,000 villages in India, in 12 states. They work really ground level, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So why BIFE exists is because basically there's monsoon, and that's awesome. People grow a lot during monsoon, but then in the dry season, farmers can't save up enough during the wet season to support themselves during the dry season. So what happens is they have 3 options generally. Okay, one option is to take out loans. Mostly those loans are to like borrow a hose from one guy in the village that has a well. Okay, so they like borrow that hose and then they drag it to their field and then they irrigate their field. Maybe they can grow a tomato crop for like a month, something like that. So they'll either take out loans to grow in the dry season, or they'll take out loans to just support themselves during the dry season. The second option is that they migrate. So you see all those like big, beautiful cities in India today. Who's building all those buildings? Those are all farmers who aren't growing during the dry season and who need to migrate. What happens is they like take out so many loans they can't pay them back, so then they have to migrate. So even if they have land, they can't necessarily plant on it after a number of years of this taking out loans migration cycle. Okay, so then there's a third option. Now you've heard a bunch of options from Ram. The option I'm going to talk to you today about is called the WADI, and that's a farming system that helps farmers grow in the dry season. And again, this is like these are these same guys that were planting. In India, this is what the fields look like mostly. They're just monocrops like this. Mostly how they are in America, except you have people plowing and doing the work instead of machines. So in June of 1996, there was a huge project called the Transfer of Technologies Project. It was aimed at 11 states for 33,000 BPL families, and BPL is below the poverty line in India. So that is under 15,000 rupees a year, which is under $330 a year. So anyone, and you can get like a BPL card. So any family that has a BPL card, they can participate in this project. Okay. So a huge amount of BIFE staff. There's a chair up here if you want to sit down. So there's like a huge amount of staff that went out to these villages. They're like going to go work with these villagers to help them grow during the dry season. Okay. So, well, that was the map of India. So if you can imagine, that's the map of India. Over there is Karnataka. Okay. And then these were the guys. These were a couple of the guys who were sent for that project. They came to Karnataka State. So there were 4 project officers for 4 districts. They rode around on one motorcycle. And they were going to work with 2,500 BTL families who mostly they just couldn't grow during the dry season if they had land. This was the strategy. The strategy was to do it through self-help groups. So what I want to be clear about in this presentation, and this is like, I'm giving you my 2 cents a little bit early. So you can have like the greatest technology in the world, right? But unless it works on like a family by family, farmer by farmer basis, it's not, the technology's worthless. So BIOS has worked for, again, like 40 years, so they're very clear about some of the strategies that work in these villages. So in India and around the world now, there's these things called SHGs, self-help groups. And they're basically groups of like 15 to 20 villagers. And the main goal is microfinance, but then it's just really a way to organize the villagers for different initiatives in the village. So the first thing these 4 program officers did was they got together SHGs with those 2,500 families. They organized them into groups, SHGs. Okay, so those with land had the choice to develop these wadis, which I'm going to get into, which is this rain-fed agriculture system. People without land could do rural non-farm sector activities, which is like selling bangles and like sheep herding, stuff that you can do if you don't have land. The other thing that the SHGs do is lending. So one of the ideas of this development model is that you go in, you transfer the technology, and then you get out, right? You don't want to like stay for 20 years. You want to go, like, you want to be out of business. If you're in the development field, like you kind of want to be out of business. You don't want to have people to help, right? So so why they have the self-help groups is that they end up saving money and then can lend to each other, so they don't have to always be dependent on the NGO for support. They also do community activities. These are it's so funny. I had to decide what I was going to tell you and what I wasn't, because this is such a part of my life. These are activities like marriages cost a lot of money in India. Fathers spend years saving up to marry their daughters off. So one of the things that the community would do is hold these mass marriages. Anyway, the idea is the sustainability of the development model. Okay, so here we are, the wadi. All right, this is a picture of the wadi. In Gujarati, it means a small orchard. It also, what does it mean, Toby?
It's a dry river bed in Arabic.
Right, so, okay, but that's not what this is on a dry river bed. Small orchard. So it's kind of like agroforestry. Does anybody know agroforestry? Yeah. So it's kind of like agroforestry, but it's super site specific. Okay, and the aim is to grow during the dry season and then to prevent. I didn't really talk about suicide. That's a difficult subject for me. So in the midst of the migration and the loans, a lot of farmers have been committing suicide because they can't pay back the loans. So anyway, that's the other goal of the wadi. Okay. So the wadi is the idea is that it's a system, a good example is like our bodies, how there are some things in our bodies that we don't really need, but pretty much every part of our body we need to like function fully for our lives. So it's a similar idea with a plot of land, so that you create all the different elements to be there so that it can sustain itself ongoingly, almost like with or without you. Okay, so I'm going to go through all the different elements. Now, it took me a long time to figure out how to actually break down, because if you were going to try and describe how your body works and all the different elements of your body, like, you'd be in med school, right? So, and